A little bit about Garst and myself. I hail from Dallas, Texas, Hook 'em Horns, and have been in Hendersonville since 1999. I've done a lot of work as a volunteer with many nonprofits in that community. I currently serve on this board, the Red Cross board, Hendersonville Country Club board, and Hardy Hospital Foundation board, and I'm a member of PEO, which is a women's philanthropy group that raises money for scholarships for young women to go to college. I started with Boys Arnold last April as the Director of Business Development after a fundraising development career prior to that. My partner here, Garst, today is from Johnson City, Tennessee. He attended Lenore Ryan, university or college?
No, university was college.
Okay, university. And received his MBA from Wake Forest. He is a certified financial analyst as well as a, let's see, I can explain what CIC is. Chartered Investment Counselor. Lots of big words. And he's been with Boys Arnold for almost 10 years. And we are hoping to enlighten you what we know from the philanthropic side as well as the investment side about an endowment for your organization, whether you have one or not. We hope to give you some good pointers. Feel free to ask us questions as we go. We'll have time at the end for questions if you want to jot them down. We also have our business cards over here on the registration table if you want to shoot us an email and ask us questions later as you think about it driving home or in the middle of the night, which is how it always works for me. And if I get on, we're in good shape. Okay. We're going to talk about endowments in three parts. This first part is going to be, do we even need one? You know, believe it or not every organization is maybe appropriate to have an endowment. What is it? How does it help me? How do I do it? And who do I ask? Because there's money involved, as you know. There are three different types of endowments. You have a true endowment, which is also referred to as a permanent endowment. The donor states that the gift is held permanently as an endowment for general purposes or a specific program, and that's identified in a written agreement. Written agreement is the key word. We also have, the second type is a quasi-endowment. It might also be known as a funds functioning as an endowment. Those are reserved funds, financial windfalls, or unrestricted gifts that the board elects to put into an endowment. Those are quasi-endowments. You can spend the principal in a quasi-endowment. There's also a term endowment. This is created for a set time period, period of years until a future event occurs. Maybe you are setting it up until the donor passes away. This is known as a term endowment. After it runs out, after the term is over, then you can spend the principal at that time. You have to label your endowment funds as one of these according to accounting standards. That's the purpose of them being designated separately, because you may have a different purpose based on what your organization's goals are. If it's for specific projects or for general benefit, you just make sure that you label it as such. Okay, so should you have one in your organization? It's not appropriate for everyone. If you are an organization that is to solve then dissolve, in other words, you're only there for a specific purpose, then maybe an endowment is not a correct for you, because it tends to be a very long-term type of account. If you are new or you don't yet have a solid donor base established, then maybe you should focus first on your infrastructure and building your donor database before starting to build an endowment. Also, for some organizations, donor advised funds through maybe your local community foundation, shout out to my friend Becky over there, that could be a good solution for you if you're starting out really, really small. They are very appropriate for organizations that are very established and you have good income already set up. That means you have revenue sources that are pretty consistent. And then you can then set aside money for some long-term solutions. Also, before starting your endowment, you should have non-endowed reserve funds put aside so that you can meet unexpected challenges like meeting payroll or for unexpected expenses that come up in your organization. So there is a 3-step plan. It's a 12-step program, so we have a 3-step program for you to start your endowment. The first thing is you need to have a comprehensive action plan. Very first thing you need is a board resolution. If your board is not behind it, you're going to have a hard time getting this baby off the ground. So your board has got to be engaged from step 1. You want it to be part of your strategic plan with your board's input, of course. You have to define the purposes of your endowment, that the board has made specific intention about how that money will be spent, and that it's going to provide for your organization in the long term. Then, step 2 is you're going to start building all the pieces parts. You need your case for support. You need to define your measurable goals. You need your strategies on how you're going to raise the money and your tactics to reach your goal that you've just set. You need a time frame. This is your initial startup, okay? So maybe you're having a specific campaign to start your endowment, but chances are it's going to be an ongoing thing for most organizations. And you need to make sure that you are planning appropriate staff and budget requirements to it. Do you need marketing materials? Do you have someone specific that's designated in their job description to be concerned with endowed funds? Is it an ED problem? I mean, you know, that needs to all be kind of laid out in the beginning. And then also, you need to make sure that you've planned appropriate time to do prospect research about who you're going to be asking money for, how the money is going to be managed and invested, which is the meat of where we're going here today, and also your donor and stewardship of the funds. Are you recognizing people? Are you putting a plaque with their name on it? How are you going to keep the stewardship of those people ongoing? And then, of course, there's the marketing of your endowment and an evaluation of how your program is going. The final thing you need to, the third phase would be identifying your champions and your donors. If you have people that are in your donor base that are championing your cause for your endowment, the purpose of that endowment money, they can be great leaders for you in going out and bringing in more money to people that you may not already know, as well as bringing in more people to champion your organization as a whole. And then also your board of directors have to really value what you're doing here with your endowment. You want them to commit the resources, be it people, time, or money, to help get you started. Any questions thus far? Excellent. Okay, let's get into some more detail about endowment policies. Number 1, it's got to be in writing. You are going to spend some time and resources defining exactly what your written policies are. You want to make sure that you have the trust and confidence of board and staff members. So by being in writing, everybody's on the same page about where we're going with this. This is also great to have for donors as well as financial advisors, professional advisors that your donors will be utilizing when you're talking about big money in some future gifts. You also want to make sure the reason that, another reason why written policies are helpful is it protects you. It protects your board, protects your staff about what your goals and objectives are with your endowment. And it's always a great idea to use financial and legal advisors when you're at this stage to make sure that you have the correct verbiage and you're laying it out legally, protecting yourself, and you've had good advice about where you're going with this. Then you want to make sure that the purpose of the funds are identified and whether or not you're using income and or principal. Okay, because you can set up, based on the type of endowment it is, which way you're going with that. You want to make sure you're very clear for your donor to understand how their money that they're going to give you is going to be spent. And you also want to be able to note any outside the box rules that you're going to allow. Okay, you can have exceptions, but you probably need to make sure you've documented what those exceptions might be and how you're going to handle that as it comes up. There is a Uniform Management of Institutional Funds Act that came out in 1972. If you are using legal counsel, they're going to make sure that you are within the guidelines of the law about how you have institutional funds set up. It's ways for the donor to be protected, and it also streamlines how they are able to influence or not influence you in your organization. It just sets up the restrictions for the donor and for your organization where everybody's boundaries are. So you want to make sure you're doing it in the legal way. Yes, sir.
I'd like you to take on the challenging balance between how you set this up in a way that a donor can understand it, as opposed to how it gets set up if the, love them all, attorneys and other professionals really do their thing with setting it up.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that comes with communication between you and your legal counsel. We're going to pick on lawyers because that's more fun. So, you know, they can be very verbose. They use a lot of words that a lot of us don't use in our everyday language. And I think you need to be able, in your marketing materials and your case for support, be able to clearly state what that big old fancy document is. You're going to need that document because what if that donor's financial advisor wants to take a look-see before they write you a check for $500,000 or whatever you're asking for. So you have to be able to bridge that gap. You need the legal piece, but you're also going to have the plain spoken piece that's very truthful and factual, but it's going to make sense to the average Joe. Does that help you?
In other words, you are saying there need to be two different pieces of paper.
Well, yes. You need your legal piece for your policies that are in your guidelines for how you run your organization. And it's going to protect you how you take the money in and how you utilize it and how you invest it and how it's spent. That's good for you and that's good for the donor. But in your case for support, in your marketing materials, you can produce something that clarifies that a little bit in the purpose of having the initial discussions with your donor. Okay. Oh, bummer. I hate that. Okay. There's other issues that you want to consider when you're setting up your policies and your guidelines for your endowment. What are your minimum funding levels? This is where a community foundation can help you if you're starting out really small. I had a really interesting conversation with McCrae Benson, who's the executive director of the Community Foundation in Henderson County. You know, they have lower minimums than some other entities might have for your own personal purposes of having an endowment. They have a lot of rules and guidelines themselves, so they're going to help you set that up. So if you're uber small, that's a great way to set that up. Also, you want to know in your organization, I think at Pardee Hospital, our minimum was $50,000 to endow something. You can build up to that, but until you reach that $50,000 mark, it's not an endowed fund. So every organization can have a different mark. What are your guidelines for gift acceptance? You can accept real estate, you can accept a boat, or you can accept just cash or stock. So these are things that you have to have outlined in your documents. What are the restrictions that you will allow? What are the provisions for investment? And we'll get in a little bit more about that in a moment. But you know, who decides how it's invested? Does the donor get to decide? Is that your investment committee or your finance committee of your board will make that decision? These are things you need to have outlined so everybody's on the same page and there's no surprises. The oversight reporting of endowment funds. If it's a separate committee of your finance committee perhaps, or of your board that oversees and reviews it on a quarterly basis or whatever. And also the spending rules. Historically, you were only allowed to spend the income that you raised. So think of your checking account. You've got this big old checking account or your money market account that you may have. The principal sits there and then the interest, you can spend that. Nowadays, you see more and more endowments that allow people to spend, they have a spending rule written in, and maybe it's 4 or 5%. that the organization is allowed to spend out of principal on top of the income. So you need to set that up, think ahead what your objective is for your endowed funds, how you're going to spend it, and how soon you need to get to it. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. And first off, I'd really like to say thank you for the work that you do. Helping our community and individuals, we really appreciate it. It helps society and probably touches the lives of everybody we know. It's a lot of hard work, and thank you very much for doing it. I would like to touch on ideas for success in picking a manager and kind of the process of things to think about, and then go further in here in a few minutes of some ideas of working together as a team. One of the first things that you're going to do when you're looking for an investment manager is to put together an RFP, a request for proposal, from different institutions. And it's going to have questions on there of what you're looking for, what questions you have, how long has the firm been around, what's the employees' performance, the structure of the company, how big it is, and assets, do they manage money for other nonprofits. And so, when you put that together, you'll send it out, you'll get a bunch of them back, and you'll kind of go through it, and you'll whittle it down to a handful of ones that look promising to work with. And I always throw out, as we start talking about Wall Street firms, it's red flags. And some of the ones that I always have is I hear sometimes, the endowment model. There isn't one. When they talk about how Harvard and Yale or Alaska Pension Fund manages money, they just do it that way because it serves their organization and their needs. That doesn't mean it actually meets your needs or anybody else's. But Wall Street likes to package things together and say, this looks good, so here, it's perfect for you. There's no such thing as an all-weather portfolio. Low volatility, but upside capture. We all want that in our portfolios for our organizations or for us personally. And pitch books that have tons of products, but they don't have any questions for you when they sit down. To me, are signs that the organizations, the entities are focused more on them than they are on what your needs are and trying to solve them. When I think about manager selection, the first thing at the top of the list is, the personnel and the personalities. You are going to spend a lot of time with these individuals, and therefore you have to like them. There's got to be, some mesh that you want to spend time, board meetings with them. You want to be able to call them and ask questions because the donors come to you. How do I make a gift on the 31st of December? And you want to have a partner there. This isn't a vendor. This is a partner that's going to help you grow and be successful with the management of your assets, but also maybe more broadly in your organization. You want to know more about the organization, how long it exists. Is it a one-person operation? Is it a star? Is it a team? What's staff turnover? Manager turnover, a lot of people think of how long is the people managing money going to be there. What we all know is when you need something, a lot of times the phone call goes to the administrative assistant to make sure that the donation goes through. You want consistency on that basis also. Edge is difficult. This goes into how are they different and maybe more successful than the people around them. Maybe it's their investment process. Maybe they're a hedge fund and they have a black box. Maybe it's their service, asset allocation, but getting a feel of why they're different, why they tend to shine above other people in their own industry. Transparency. Part of it's easy. Who do they work with? Yes?
Sorry, what is ADV on your previous?
Sorry, ADV is a filing that most investment managers and RIAs do with the SEC. It's what we have to do to stay in compliance. Every year, we turn it in. We're supposed to give it when we do a presentation to a client or a prospect, and it outlines what our filing status is, who's the major owners of the company, how long have they been there, has there been any legal ramifications, against the entity over time. So it kind of spells out in bullet points for the SEC what we do and how we do things, and it's a great resource for you. And it should be available either on a website or being handed out to you when they send back the RFP to you.
Okay, so it's part of our due diligence to take a look at that.
Yes, it is.
And if there's been an issue, if there's been some legal issue against the firm that has to show in there.
Correct.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm. Transparency, going back to the documents, the ADV, do they have a client agreement that you would sign off to work with them? And this is somewhat easy because you can see them, and also in this part of transparency, who do they work with? Who are their vendors? Are they working with a large accounting firm like around here, Dixon Hughes, that audits them every year? Are they working with a large law firm like a Van Winkle or a Wirewood Bissett? Or are you in a Bernie Madoff situation where it's in the back of the Quickie Mart? And, you know, you kind of align, you look at them and say, they're aligning with strong members and that's servicing them. So that should say a little bit about the reputation of the firm. It's harder on the investment thoughts and rationale about how they go through their day-to-day business to uncover. Capacity, if you're a large endowment, you may be looking at hedge funds. They may not be accepting money. They may need a minimum. You may not be able to get into them. But for all of us, what's the personal attention capacity? If I call them, will they call me back? If I need to have a donor come in, will they sit down and talk? You know, what's that area? Can they work with my organization? Or do they work over here and they're just taking me on and I'm going to be the third, you know, day phone call back? Performance I put on the second page for a reason is you need to give them a chance to explain it. They could have great returns, average returns, but if you just look at the numbers, you can't always tell whether it's right for your organization. Maybe they take on less risk. Maybe their style's been out of favor. You need to kind of dig down a little bit deeper and understand not only what the numbers are, but why they are that way. Because you can have someone that had a great year last year, all they owned was one stock, it went up 1,000%, and all the rest of the performance is not good. But if you start at that point, you've ruled out some other people who may have more consistent returns and meet the goals of your organization. And then fees, are they transparent and aligned? What I mean by transparent is, if you're doing an assets under management, you put money with them, they bill you for that, that's pretty clear. But are they getting, you know, fees for trading securities to certain firms? Are they getting a trail from a mutual fund company? All of those are expenses to your endowment. So you need to understand how they're getting paid and how you're paying them to negotiate your fee down the road.
What is the question we should be asking? I mean, it's kind of intimidating. I'm listening to you, but you walk into a potential money manager, and what do I say? I want to know what your fees are, and I want to know what every other kind of fee there is on our money. Does that question do it?
Absolutely. And you know, the firm that we work for, we are upfront in saying that we do not take any trading. It's in our ADV, it's in our materials, that we don't take any trading on stocks at a certain firm. We don't get a penny a share that we trade. We don't take soft dollars. And we're open to letting everybody know. That's also in the ADV typically, if they're getting a kickback from a referral source or something like that, what that is. It's not saying that one's right or wrong, just to better understand how you're paying for the services is what's critical to make sure the cost is right and you know exactly what it is. And we're never offended when someone asks us. We're open about it and we're okay with it. So
have you discussed, I'm sorry if I missed it, what your level is? I mean, my understanding is a lot of the small nonprofits really, you know, a major money manager wouldn't want to take them on until they achieve a certain level. Until that point, we go to the community foundation. Is there some basic understanding of what that level is?
It varies, and it's hard to say. I mean, we personally, our typical, client is $1 million minimum. We have clients, and we also have not-for-profits that range from $100,000, up to the millions. And a lot more of us, to our organization, I think others, is what can we give back? What kind of value can we add to the relationship? And it's going to vary from, if you go to a Goldman Sachs or you go to someone locally. But I wouldn't be intimidated and say, well, I'm not going to ask them if they want to take a look at this because I don't know if I'm big enough.
Okay, so that's part of their philanthropic gift.
Yes.
Yes.
Part of yours is taking on a nonprofit that isn't at your $1 million level.
Yes.
Sometimes.
If we think it's a good match and we can add value to the organization, we're worried about.
So I'll expound on that. So we have an existing endowment through endowment with the community foundation, North Carolina Community Foundation. So we're in the process of campaigning to launch that. At what level would it behoove us, if we're trying to grow a $2 million endowment, should we consider switching?
I think it's part of your ongoing looking at, you know, what services you're getting right now. You know, I would say if it's, you know, $5,000 or $10,000, it's going to be harder to make that change. If it's 100 to 200, you know, I think you always look around and see what's out there and see if there's a good match. And if they say, you know, it's not, we can't add value, it's going to be too expensive. What have you lost? You've done your due diligence for your board and for your organization.
Those are great questions, and I think you should be reviewing where you are and what you're doing fairly regularly. And I think just like we tell our clients or people that we're talking to that we do have a minimum, typically, we do stretch that in special situations, especially with nonprofits, and I think you'll find many others that might do that for you, I don't know. And that's what you need to, we'll turn people away if it doesn't fit our firm because we want to put our arms around you and be comprehensive for you. So if the community foundation is serving all that you need, then you're fine to stay there. When you feel like you need a little more service and attention, that's when you have to start looking around. Does that answer your question? All right, so we've talked about what is an endowment. We've talked about how it helps your nonprofit. We've talked about how you might start off in the beginning steps to get one going. Now we want to talk about who do you ask? You need to do a hardcore analysis of your current donors and their giving habits. So Garst is my donor, but he only gave me one gift one time, okay? And then Valerie's my donor, but she gives me money every year. And through my detective reasoning, I've learned she got lots more somewhere else. So, you know, you need to be thoughtful and strategic about what you've got in your donor database. So you really need to spend some time looking at what you have and who is in there and what kind of relationship they have with your organization currently. You want to go to your board members. Boy, howdy, they better be all over this because they're the ones who got you into this mess. They need to be supporting it.
Was that phrase, boy, howdy?
You got it.
He's a Dallas.
He's a Dallas. That's right.
It's kind of like woo-hoo.
Yeah. The passionate in your organization, those volunteers that are engaged with your organization, that are very passionate about what you do, they are potentially fabulous donors to your endowment. Your annual donors need to be reviewed because many times your annual donors are ripe for an uptick in how they're giving to your organization. Planned gift donors. Is the planned gift the appropriate way for them to fund your endowment? Have they already made one planned gift? Are they a prospect for a second planned gift that's fed right into your endowment? And then also your major gift donors. You really can look at every segment of your donor database to consider them for a gift to your endowment. Okay, now we're going to move into phase 2 here. Part 2, this is the benefits of charitable contributions for you. And one thing I know many of you have heard and have been fearful of is, am I going to rob Peter to pay Paul by starting an endowment, which is a huge concern, and I understand that. We'll talk about that. Then we're going to talk about selling your organization and also some bits and pieces about marketing. So the question about starting a new fund, be it large or small, are you jeopardizing your other campaigns to fund your endowment? It's really important to integrate your endowment program into all the other organization fundraising efforts. You want to make sure you've got organizational resources, okay? But you need to make it just as important as everything else. It's a myth, a great myth, that raising endowment funds are going to diminish funds for other purposes, like your annual campaign or your special events. People are terrified of this in the fundraising world. I know this, I've been there, felt it, but it is not one and the same because your endowment is sold differently. It's a separate opportunity for donors to make a huge impact for your organization. And you need to educate them on the purpose of your long-term funds, because that's what your endowment is, long-term funds. So they're given every year to your annual campaign, and maybe that's operational money, maybe that's real steady Eddie kind of thing. But your long-term impact is really where your donor wants to be. Annual gifts come from current income and are typically operational, but not always. But your endowments can be built more through the planned gifts. Legacy gifts, deferred giving, insurance gifts. Think of it as the difference of their cash flow is more deemed towards the annual giving because they're writing a check and it's not dinging them on a month-to-month basis. An annual gift is more immediate, whereas you are addressing things that don't hit their cash flow necessarily for your long-term endowment gifts. You can make this part of a capital campaign. You can make it a mini campaign that's within another campaign. For example, you're raising money for scholarships inside your new college that you're building, okay? You could also earmark special proceeds from a special event, a percentage of proceeds to go into your endowment. You can also transfer annual fund reserves into your endowment. All these are possibilities to help build your endowment and keep it from attacking other fundraising efforts. So how are we going to build it? You want intense, organized, and a specific campaign for your endowment. Yes, it's going to mesh into your overall mission of your organization, and yes, it's going to be something that is not set up to bogart your other areas of fundraising. But you are going, yes, sir.
No, finish your thought.
Go ahead.
We're a 27-year organization, but we only had one campaign, a capital campaign, that just ended. And so my thought with our endowment is to re-engage those capital campaign donors because, and I need to know if I'm off base here, because those $100,000 gifts aren't coming for operations. They want legacy. They want it to be here. They understand that language. It computes to them, the capital campaign and endowment campaign, that makes sense to them versus let me get an annual gift for
Right.
operations. Is that kind of what?
Absolutely. And it's all in how you present it to them and where they are and what they want to do. Yeah.
Yeah, because some of the cues are that they love your organization, they want to see it
Right.
continue in the future. I mean, that's a cue that if the donor is coming to that language, and that makes an endowment prospect, a light bulb go off on your head. Because they're thinking strategically, they're thinking long-term, they may be a good prospect for endowment. And they're protecting the gift after the capital campaign too, by ensuring that the organization's going to exist after this immediate building.
Yes,
So
sir.
some of the earmarking you're talking about, what he's talking about here is the capital campaign is for a facility.
Right.
You raise the
And that money
pay
needs to go to the
So
facility.
it's easy to sell a wing to somebody. You give this much, this is your wing, they'll put your name on it. But earmarking could be that wing. It could be a way of saying, this is.
I think that probably has to be set up initially, and you would have to get permission from that donor to redesignate it at this
No.
point. Okay.
I mean in terms of marketing it.
Oh, yeah,
You
yeah.
would go to the same type of individual, the same list of individuals and say.
You would do the same thing.
We gave you your
Sure.
wing, you gave us this much, now we want to.
Just because you put somebody's name above the door because they gave it.
You can't put your name above.
Sure you can. You can stick a plaque in the hallway of your endowment gifts. Absolutely. You want to recognize them. Absolutely. So in building it, you are setting up a lot of benefits for yourself. And those include familiarity with your organization. They're probably already loving you, and you are just adding to that steam. You are encouraging your donors to think big. Everybody wants to leave a legacy, be powerful, do something magnanimous outside themselves. And maybe they want to be anonymous, and that's fine too. But think big for them. Help them see the future of where you're going. That shows credibility to your organization. That shows strength. That shows you are here for a long, long time, which is a refreshing thing when you've been in a down economy for some time. You want to push your annual giving to new levels in stepping them towards endowment gifts, so you may see the benefit in other areas of your fundraising. You want to build your volunteer leadership. If you're having a specific campaign for your endowment because it's new, or you're doing a new push for it, you may be engaging additional volunteers into your organization to help you with that process. You want to increase your organization's visibility to the people that are in your community as well as your existing donors. And you're going to be able to allow your donors to pledge in multi-year pledges so that they're with you for a time. And don't, it's different than an annual fund thought, because you want your $1,000 check or whatever and off they go on their merry way. They may come to your groovy event. But with this, it is long-term stewardship of that person, because they've made perhaps a specific long-term pledge with a large amount of money to your organization. Okay, so how do we market this bad boy? You can talk all day long about you're going to build it, you're going to have policies, you've got your board on board. Now how do you go out and engage all these donors that you've identified? You want to make sure that you're giving your prospective donors reasons to contribute to you. What is their buy-in into what you're doing with your endowment? Is it going to be an outright gift? Is it going to be a planned gift? Is it going to be something that makes them feel good about your organization? You want to be consistent in your promotions. You want to have the same message that you're sending out all along your campaign. And that's difficult in a multi-year, 100-year endowment, because your story may change a little bit, but you need to stay true to what the endowment is all about. You want to make sure you've got personal contact with those people. Are they engaged in being steward in another way? And you also want to make sure you're positioning your mission of your organization in a prominent way for this purpose, and it also just enhances everything else that you're doing. It increases your, you want to make sure that you're doing things that increase your visibility. You want to make sure that you are always refreshing your donor database and looking at who potential donors are. New people move into the community, people inherit money, all sorts of life events change that will change who you're engaging for the purpose of who you're marketing to. And you want to make sure you're recognizing those endowment donors. Other things that you want to, you know what I keep doing? There we go. I keep pushing the wrong button. Other things that you want to make sure you emphasize. Naming opportunities, which we were just talking about. Absolutely, you want their name recognized in your annual report, in your newsletters, in the hallway, whatever you got to do. Because that endowment gift is just as impactful, if not more, than the major gifts you receive for that endowment, for that capital campaign to build your new wing. Very, very important. And that should probably be outlined in your policies about how they will be recognized based on the maybe giving level of what they've done. Make sure that you are fulfilling your mission. Mission. That should have been the very first thing. You want to make sure you're emphasizing long-term support of your organization, memorial funds, honorary funds, to remember, if you're a hospital, you remember a doctor that started the place. If you're hospice, you memorialize the person that started hospice, or maybe a specific volunteer that gave gazillion hours one year. There's lots of ways to spend that. Your specific purpose, is it for a scholarship? Is it for a specific program within your organization? Lots of opportunities to gear your endowment marketing towards one of these areas. And the flexibility, your donor has lots of ways they can give that gift to you. Make sure that where you are setting up your marketing plan and developing your marketing case for support all the way to the printed brochure, that you are engaging board members, staff members, maybe donors that are going to be part of that campaign, so that everybody is bought into what it's all about, and you get lots of different perspectives about what you need to send your message out. And again, your board making it a resolution to do this endowment, being part of your strategic plan is all very helpful to make sure you're going down the right path. Okay, so we got an endowment already, now what? No, this is you.
Go ahead. You know, when you got the endowment, and you think about, what are some things that could go wrong? You got it all set up, it's going right along, you think everything's well, and it could be market environment, lack of diversity in the portfolio. You may have too much stocks, too much bonds, you don't have a properly diversified portfolio to be able to handle bad times or take opportunities in good times. Also, it may not be able to generate the cash flow that you need at a certain period of time because you're in a stressed period of markets like we saw in 2009. This lack of liquidity in stressed times was very important with large endowments that were working with hedge funds. They had a huge amount of hedge funds. They were past their lockup period. They go to the hedge fund and they say, I want my $1 million back. And they say, no, we just put the gates up. There's some fine print in here that says, we don't have to give you your money back right now. We can spread it over a time period or wait until stress is out of the market. And you're looking back on, I need money. This can also happen if you're not even with hedge funds and you just have a market that's down and you don't want to liquidate out of the endowment or the funds until the market recovers. So setting up a short-term, cash pile to get you through those times is very important. And also knowing how your endowment is working and also how your donors give to make sure if you can live off of some donor money from an annual giving while something needs to come back, while you need the markets to come back, and to think that through as you're putting it together. Lack of inflation protection. You go down the road, 15 or 20 years or 30 years, and you're funding something, and then all of a sudden you look back and go, why do I have a shortfall? Well, healthcare inflation has been at 8%. It wasn't at 3.5%. And all of a sudden you're out raising more money to fund the same endowment you thought you had sewn up to begin with. And then events change more quickly than governance. A lot of people think always it's about, the bad bond market in '94, or it was the tech bubble, or it was the financial meltdown. Those are market events, and you have to recognize those. But let's go on structural change. That's where governance really needs to change. If you think about what just happened, we have a new healthcare law. That's going to change a lot of the organizations. You're going to have to retool, figure out what's covered, what's not covered, how is it going to affect the people that you're helping right now? Do you need to change your organization and grow with it? Was it in Japan, where you went through not a couple of years of a down market, but 30 years of declining interest rates, right? What did those organizations in Japan, they had to change something dramatically to survive. So looking at structural changes, baby boomers, is also important as you're looking at that endowment, how it has to change over time. I want to touch on a little bit of culture, governance, and time horizon with kind of a focus on working with investment managers and kind of that working around that area. And part of it is, in the donors, is your organizations solve problems. That's why they're here. There's an issue out there and you want to fix it. As individuals, you need to focus on what can you do to help solve a problem for your organization, raising money, investing in the endowment. What about the income beneficiaries and the donors? If you look at this thinking strategically, how does it need to change over time with the endowment? Now, when you think, I say income beneficiaries, that's really all the services and whether it's food, transportation, education, whatever you're trying to do, that costs you income to get it to the final product. If you go through a bad down market, how many people aren't getting meals that may need to while you're waiting for that to come back? So as you're making your investment decisions and your policy decisions, you have to think about the end result as much as the organization and how a misstep may affect their lives. And then when you look at the donors, they're already here to help the organization or you wouldn't be talking to them right now. More than likely, you met them through the community, or they've been on your board, or they've come to a function. So right now they want to help you. How can you help them? How can you turn the table and say, thank you for helping us. Let's figure out maybe what's the best way for you to give us a gift. So they walk up to you and they say, you know, I'm going to give you $100,000. You go, that's great. Take it, and you just walk away with it. Or you turn back around and you say, you know, do you have $100,000 worth of low basis stock? You know, in that scenario, if you think about it, they could give you $100,000. If they have to sell the low basis stock, let's say it's zero, another $100,000 will replenish their cash. They pay the government 30%. They now have $70,000. They've really given away $130,000. 100 to you and $30,000 to the government. If they gave you the low basis stock, you sell it with no taxes, they keep the cash, they've got $100,000, you've got $100,000, you have solved an issue for them, and they're going to thank you for that. Another issue may be their income. They need to generate income. It may not help the endowment, but when you look at different avenues for your organization, there may be a charitable annuity that generates them income and benefits you down the road, your organization, if not the endowment, or different problem solvings to help them give you money that they probably already want to do. And then you have to balance all three of these. And also, Debbie brought up a point of what asset do they give? Could it be real estate? Could it be a boat? If you've got a client who needs income and they have a piece of land over here that's not generating any income, they may be more willing to part with that than the cash that they need to live on from month to month. And so be open-minded to, you know, when they're committed, when they're in the door, what can you do to help them make the process easier? Thank you, fiduciary. I know this is worry about reputation, funding. Align your team. Make sure they're talking to each other. And also at the same time, think about the people who are giving you money. Would it be prudent to talk to their attorney, their CPA, their investment manager, bring it all together? Again, you're a problem solver. You're helping them make sure they give to your organization in the best manner possible. And as a fiduciary, tolerate short-term volatility. Don't manage your fund based on CNBC and Bloomberg. That's just going to get you in trouble. Governance should be real-time and dynamic and open-minded to adapt with the changes. You should have transparency and accountability, and this should be friendly and welcome. Everybody wants to do what's good for the organization and the cause, so it should be set up in a way that when you ask these questions, it's not at someone, it's can you help me solve this, whether it's the manager or a board member. And we spoke about returns. Think about the time frame. If it is a long-term, 20, 30, or a lifetime, you know, you have to have careful risk management because things today are amplified. If you mark to regular inflation across the United States at 3.5%, and you're in the healthcare industry, 30 years later, that 8 versus 3 or 3.5 makes a big difference. You don't feel it in the first couple of years. You feel it way down the road. So you need to think about your decisions today. If you get out of the market at the bottom and it recovers 100%, okay, not so good. But if you compound what you've lost over the next 20 years, that's a big number. Managing your cash flow years in advance to match what you're trying to fund. And the world's changed. When you look at the last 20 years, cheap credit, right? Leverage is over with. It blew up a few years ago. It's not back yet. Bond yields were declining. That helped your bond returns. Investors were getting higher yields on their investments than they are now, especially on their bonds. And events are changing more quickly than governance. The price of investor capital has gone up. And what I mean by that is if you think about this, a client or a donor that had $10 million 5 years ago was getting 5% on their money. That's $500,000 a year. They're sitting around the table going, you know what, honey, I think we can live on $400,000 of this. Let's give $1 million of it away. We're still going to have enough money to live on. We'll have $4.5 or $450,000 a year. All's good. They went through this. They recovered. They didn't give the money. They're at $10 million. They're getting 3%. It's now $300,000 in yield on their money. They're still trying to give back to the $400,000. right? They feel like they've got, you know, a $6 million portfolio, not a $10 million portfolio because of the yield off of it. That means you need to go back to them, help them solve problems. You have to go back to them and figure a way to get different income. Maybe use land, use an asset, use something else. You need to work with them to solve their problems because they want to give you money, they just don't know how based on where they are in their investment portfolio right now. We've spoken about most of the risk management parts on this: diversification, obligations, liquidity, income investments, efficient frontier. Make sure your portfolios are working as efficiently for the amount of risk that they're taking on. Most investment managers will kind of show you, where it is, what it did in the last down market, to see if that feels comfortable. I'm going to skip that part and go to this is a cheat sheet for you. When you're talking to investment managers, these are some of the things that they should be asking you. They're going to sit down and say, now, what's your goals and objectives? What are you trying to accomplish? How much money do you have in the fund? And they're going to get to know what's going on. They're going to be very inquisitive, and it should take a good bit of time. And then they're going to sit down and go, okay, if it's a 3%, and they're going to do a whole bunch of calculations, they're going to come out with a number of what the portfolio needs to grow at to meet your needs. And then they're going to sit down and look at the risk that it can take on. And I'll give you an example of the first question, the first way they'll be looking at it. You sit there and you come through and it's $10 million, we're going to take 3% off of it a year, it's for a lifetime. The manager looks at it and says, this is going to work out, we can take on a lot of risk, it's a long tail, I've got to worry about inflation, can have volatility because it's only 3%, it's not, we're not taxing the money at 3%. So this is good. So they've looked at the portfolio, they thought about that. Now, a good manager who's talking to you should go to the next question. What percent of this is your operating budget? And you go, well, it's 100%. The manager should take a step back and go, okay, let me see. If this goes down 30%, we're at 7 million times 3, that's 210,000. You need 300,000. Where are you going to come up with the other 900,000? And they go, now we can't take on any more risk. Then you have to get all of that to agree. But they should be asking you questions like this so that you know they're focused on your organization and not on their organization. And then they should look for all the constraints that may be imposed on the endowment that helps them manage the money. And the last one is kind of the unique one. It's the catch-all. If you're, an example I always use is in healthcare. If you're in the healthcare arena, well, if you're helping people get well, it may not look good to your donors to have, sin stocks like tobacco, alcohol, and firearms. They may not appreciate that when they get ready to write the check to see Philip Morris at the top of the list. So you should think about what should or should be in the portfolio when you're putting it together with your manager.
Cool. Last slide. On your financial statements, you'll see that in 2011 you had $50 million in your endowment. Remember what kind of endowment it is. How much of that is really in your spending limit? Okay. In this particular example, inflation's at 3 1/4. We have a 4% spending rule. So a 4% allowance is only $2 million. So even though you see $50 million on your balance sheet, don't get all excited because you're really only able to spend out $2 million. So these are the types of things that you need to educate yourself on, in addition to all types of plan giving functions, so that you know what you really have that is able for your organization to use. Does that make sense? And then finally, bios on Garst and myself. I hope that you gain something that will help you in your organization, build your endowment. Welcome any questions you might have.
Debbie, when we talked about this, you mentioned an example about a donor. I think you set up an endowment fund someplace else in another state, and then they moved to our state. The rules, the percentage rules or something. Okay. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Any questions for these two? Yeah.
Yeah, I apologize for talking too much, but anyway, I will tell you, I think this is a truly remarkable presentation. And if I'm guessing what the folks who are in an agency or nonprofit today, who are development directors or executive directors, are listening to this, it's an overwhelming amount of information. Because basically it's endowment and investment and financial management information. It's also marketing and how you get about that. And thinking about the folks who are going to go back to their ED, or going to go back to their board and try and talk about all this. I would presume that to a degree, Debbie and Garst were able to answer a phone call here. But it's also similar to a capital campaign that you may need to bring somebody else in. I mean, there's 6 consultants in the room today. And where the rubber meets the road is how am I going to get, and don't miss the fact that you may need an outside voice to help present this to your executive director board, because it's going to take time, it's going to take focus, it's going to take money to do all this.
And also, as they have mentioned, we have great community foundations here. Becky Davis is at one, we have one in Henderson County, and so those are also resources too. We're not here pitching Boys Arnold per se, just a concept, because some of us are overwhelmed and we do not have adequate resources, and yet we're supposed to, raise $1 million today for our endowment fund. And so how do we make those decisions? And it's very helpful to be able to talk with your colleagues about it.
It's a massive issue. We culled information that we gathered together to be able to give you a comprehensive look at all the pieces parts to starting an endowment. Don't be overwhelmed to think that you can't do it, because you can, and it'll only benefit your organization in the end. You need to make sure that you take the proper steps to do it right. You do have to spend some money up front to get good legal counsel, and you just have to ask a lot of questions, and no question is inappropriate to ask.
And I think if you build the right team of attorneys, CPA, investment manager, and get them working together as a team instead of 4 individuals, they can really add a spark. Because we have worked down, especially in the Low Country and Hilton Head Office, invitations to donors and stuff about how they can give to their documents, to their trusts, and we really have tried to help. And I think many of the community foundations, whoever it is, will want to team up and help you to succeed at growing and trying to accomplish your goals at the end. And if you get all those people talking together, your CPA attorney and your investment manager and consultant may come up with great ideas sitting around the table, perfect for your organization that may not be right for somebody else's.
And I was just going to add, part of the team piece, I totally agree with what you started the study, that the board is critical in this. So part of that strategic thinking is, who do we need to recruit to our boards that then can be part of this from the very beginning? And if you don't have that kind of person on your board, be strategic about who you need to go get.
Great observation. Let's thank Debbie and Garst for being here.
Are you willing to share the PowerPoint?
Yeah, I was going to put it on the website. You just download it with the link, and if that doesn't happen in a few days, email me and I'll